Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Priceless podcast. My name is Michael Sechen, and I'm your host. I want to remind you that all the links for the podcast will be in the podcast description if you're watching the YouTube video, and if you're listening to us, you will find it on our webpage. But the link to this webpage you will find in the podcast description again. So please like us, subscribe, and share with others for who you think this might be of any help. And leave us a review. So today we travel from... Last time we were in Poland, so today we travel to Denmark, to Copenhagen. And we have another guest who again likes learning all the time. And he studied church planting. He started as a financial advisor. He also is a nutritional therapist. And he has a doctorate in logotherapy, so he is everywhere. So whatever you need, call Mr. and Dr. Arno Steen Andreasen. He's my guest today. Hello, Arno.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you too, and thank you for agreeing to do this. I'm so excited to share with the people the story, and I'm so thankful that you're willing to share your story because, as we already mentioned in this podcast so many times, it is so important that other people can hear our story, and this is what helps them. Those people who are maybe not very accustomed or that don't know many LGBT people, it's a help to get to know us and to see that we're just human beings with needs and feelings. And also for others who are LGBT and might be still in the closet, to also hear stories of other LGBT people who have been there and are now in a different place. And also for us who have been out for some while, but it's just nice to see that we are not alone and that there are others out there and that we can learn and share our stories. So thank you again. And before we start into any other questions, I wanted to ask, I gave a short introduction, and I forgot to mention that you are the co-president of the European Forum of LGBT Christians. I'm mentioning the EU Forum all the time because most of my guests for now are from the European Forum. So, as I said, the link will be in the podcast description. But what would you add to your description, to your introduction? Who are you, Dr. Arno Steen Andreasen?
Well, there's many different things, of course, for all of us. I'm a dad. I've got 2 adult children, 2 girls. I have been a pastor for many years. Today I work with the homeless, especially migrants. I love reading. I love dancing, piano playing.
Behind you.
Yes, there's a few of the books. I think there's many facets to our lives, aren't there? And so lots of different things to dig into. Yeah.
Yeah, so how do you identify with your gender and sexuality?
I see myself as gay, and yes, I use the pronouns he and him, and so that way.
So let's dive right into it.
Yes.
How or when and where maybe did you discover that you were gay? How was that for you?
Well, for me, it's to do with revelation, really, to getting that self-revelation at different times in your life. I'm very aware of it going back to my teens. So I definitely remember very specific situations when I was 13, but also I'm quite sure there were situations before that, but I can't date it so clearly. But I definitely know I was attracted to other guys when I was 13. That's very, very clearly doing that. And I was fooling around with another guy at that time as well for 6 years. I was not I knew that, but I'm 55 years old, so it also means that my teenage years was the HIV and AIDS years. So I come from a non-church background, but I did feel that it was a curse being gay, because my kind of my thinking was gay means AIDS, meaning you will die before you're 25. So I never expected to live on the other side of 25. So I thought this is a real curse. Everybody's scared. We see all the things on the news. This is a real issue. So I wanted kind of to get out of it. Later became a Christian. Church also said you should get out of it. And that became that journey, even though I knew I was gay from when I was a teenager. And then again, through conversion therapy and other things like that, prayer, deliverance, 40 days of fasting, all these different things as you do, it's kind of, I couldn't get rid of it. Then there's a depression for a year. Then it was hypertension, things where my body started to break down. And then I experienced, when I was revising my first book, I was away for 3 weeks. On my own. I couldn't really communicate with anybody at the place I was. They didn't understand me. And I didn't speak their language. And I just felt God was saying to me, that I'm not going to heal you because you're not broken. And you've been faithful to your church and your family. And that became my kind of major breakthrough in a way, because it meant that I could be who I am. And I didn't have to keep on trying to be somebody else. I didn't have to keep on fighting, praying, saying sorry to God every day for being alive. And why would he be so angry with me? And why are you so disappointed with me? And Christians, of course, always through the period have said, oh, if you just believe enough, or once you get rid of it enough. And I thought, come on, I'm married to a woman. I've got 2 children. I want to honor them and I love them. So don't come and tell me I'm not serious about kind of praying the gay away, because boy, have I done that for decades, for over 3 decades. So you could see kind of the revelation was there from a young age, but then again, there's been different kind of things added to it. But my big breakthrough was just in that moment, I felt God is for me, and this is my wild card. This is my thing that I have to contribute to this world as well. So my personality very much includes my gayness and what that means and what that does to gender stereotypes and everything else as well. I've got something to offer into this. And if God is okay, I can be okay. And I just experienced in that moment, shame just lifted from my shoulders and I thought, okay, God is okay, then I can be okay. And that was a major breakthrough for me.
Yeah.
Didn't expect it. Yeah. But healing came in a different way than I expected. Yeah.
I can connect to that very well. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about, you mentioned that you became Christian later. How was that connected with your sexuality, and how was the whole experience, and what did it mean to you?
Well, one of the reasons I became a Christian as a 17-year-old was actually kind of to get away from being gay, because I still didn't want to die before I was 25. And so I got introduced to Christianity through my piano teacher, who had become a Christian a few years previously. She asked me to be part of a prayer or a Bible study group in her home. We looked at the uniqueness of Jesus, was the booklet, and we studied that. And it was just a revolution to me, because in school I always heard about the myths. That was the kind of the word being used, the myths. And for me, myths meant a fairy tale. So even when we talk about Jesus, it was kind of, oh yes, this fairy tale about Jesus. So finding out that actually Jesus has lived, that was not a kind of faith. Faith was, is he the Son of God? But actually that there was a guy going around at that time is evidence that he talked about healing, and he talked about, these kind of very incredible things about an upside down society. That is very real. Who he was, that is to do with faith. And that was mind blowing to me. I grew up in a political family, so I always knew that I was going to be a politician. I always knew I was going to be in parliament and ideally be the Secretary of Education, and change education in Denmark and all this. This was kind of what I was predestined to become. I have run for parliament. I have run for local councils and things like that as well. But I just realized that God can do so much more than a law can do, because God can change hearts. So yes, I could be a politician and I could throw people to prison if they kind of broke the law, but God can change hearts. And I thought that is the most powerful thing in the world that we can do, is to touch lives. And if that is so, I wanted to get hold of that. So I became a Christian to live, and I became a Christian to get into ministry.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you were married to a woman.
Yes.
How was that for you as a gay man?
But I was very privileged being married for 30 years, and we had a really nice marriage, and I loved her very much and still do. But I also I thought, beside the love for her as well, at that time you would also say to people as well, that is part of your healing as well. It is part of the whole thing. And I thought, oh yes, it kind of I love her and I'll do whatever for her. So that will be part of also showing my faith. It will be part of also kind of both showing God and each other. And I was very devoted to her and she to me for these 30 years. But it became more and more with that revelation I talked to you about, became more and more difficult to kind of stay closeted. She knew my story, and there's always been people knowing my story since I was a teenager. But it was just more and more difficult in kind of doing that, because again, especially as the church debate started over the last 5, 7, 8 years again, I just realized that church debates have not moved on since I was a teenager. We are still being demonized. We are still being thrown to hell. We are still being called perverts and pedophiles and everything else. We're still not patriots if we are gay and all this. And I just thought, I need to speak out. I can't keep on not saying anything, because also both I'm listening to all the things people are actually speaking over my life, and I have to cope with. I'm actually getting traumatized by the church and by society. And I'm not able to really speak my mind. I've always said certain things, but I've not been able to fully say what it means. And I thought, I can't keep on living in a way where I cannot fully speak up and still show respect to my family, because this will be too painful. If I spoke up, was married, and also with my kids, I thought, this is too painful. Everybody will start to ask again weird questions of them as well. And I know some mixed orientation marriages work really, really well, and ours did in many ways too. I also wanted to be ensured that again, that my wife and myself also were able to be with a partner that could fully meet our emotional, physical, psychological needs, which of course I can't do in the same way as I'm a gay man.
This goes into my next question, because one thing that I got asked, because I was also married to a woman, is where people ask, why do you think, if you say you had a good marriage, if you say you had a good relationship, and I would even argue that in many ways, because we had to talk about our situation, we really talked a lot and we had a very good connection. So why is it that you felt, I cannot stay within this marriage? Why was it not good for you?
Well, one of the things is that my body has for a long time said it was not good for me. And we know as well, there's been some statistics from the States that says that actually often closeted people die earlier than others because of the stress you're living under. So your body simply breaks down. And as I mentioned before, I had a depression. It lasted for a year. That was already back to 2009. So again, it's a long time ago, after my hypertension started and other things as well. So my body was starting to break down, and still did not mean that I just kind of quickly said, okay, let's just do something else. And I think many of us who are in mixed orientation marriages, we actually stay in them for a very long time because we do love our partners, and we actually do want to do whatever to make them work. So it's not like, as the church often would, it almost sounds from the church that we kind of, we just get an idea and then just tomorrow we're just out of it and just move on. Actually, many of us have been fighting for our marriages for many, many years, because actually out of love and respect for our partner. But my body was breaking down as well. And my psyche was breaking down. And still I stayed in many years after that. But I could just see as well that life is going to be short in a different way if I don't continue, if I continue. But also the relation of Jesus saying, I'm not going to heal you. Because then there was no hope that I would ever become that man I said yes to be when we got married in 86.
Yeah. So you also, thank you so much for this. I mean, I'm just amazed at and deeply touched by your vulnerability that you're showing. So thank you. I always experience it as a gift, when people are just sharing what's very intimate, and it is very intimate. So I'm thankful. I wanted to ask you a little bit because you mentioned restorative or reparative therapy.
Yes.
How, was it part of an organization, or was it just part of your journey while you were being a part of the church, or and I'm interested, how was this experience for you?
Yes. Well, remember that I said that I felt it was a curse before I came to church. So I think it's very important, because most of us have the story, church is always the negative one, and this is where it started. That was not the way for me. It was my fear of AIDS. And therefore being gay was a curse. Then I became a Christian as a 17-year-old into an evangelical setting. And they, of course, also said, yes, this is a curse, and yes, you will go to hell. So that it can, in a way, just confirm what I already felt. Then within the church, I start to hear that there are different things that you can do to get out of it. And I started to read some of the books. I went to Leon Payne conference about pursuing sexual wholeness. I was part of the Living Waters program and the Kamitsky's program about, again, to kind of pray the gay away. I've been through deliverance sessions. I've had accountability partners for 15 years, where I, to two pastor colleagues, will confess even my temptations, not even get to this sinful state, just even temptations. Of course, I've been through the 7 Steps to Freedom, the Neil Anderson stuff, the Sandfords and their writing, you name it, whatever the evangelical church threw at me, I said yes to. Not because I was forced to, but because I wanted to live. And also after getting married, even more as well, I wanted to be this heterosexual husband that I said yes to be. So the church did not force me. If it was indirectly by, of course, sending me to hell. But it was but I think it was my choice in many ways to do it. I think it was. I had that decision-making power. But I forgot to say, I also fasted twice for 40 days. So no food for 40 days as well, because again, to show God I was serious and I really wanted to change. So the problem is that when you're in it, you keep on hoping that this thing will fix you. And you keep on, people love to talk about practicing homosexuals or not. And I was definitely a practicing straight man, but it did not change my longing. It did not change my orientation. So practice does not make perfect. It's kind of it is, and the problem in that language is also, it actually puts a pressure on our partner to fix us. If the sex is good enough, if the emotional support is good enough, whatever, then we will change. It's actually an awful negative view of our partners, and often on women, that they have to be the one fixing us. If they're just good enough, they will fix us through marriage. And I think that is my issue, that when you start to actually see what it has done to me, it actually damaged my faith. All these Christian things damaged my faith. The church movement that I was leading as part of founding, we had Isaiah 58 as one of our foundational texts, where the Spirit of the Lord is upon me text, and again about that that our healing will come. 58. That was 62. 58 is one again about the healing will come swiftly if we take care of the poor and some of those things. And that was also one of our main texts. And at some point I thought, I cannot preach one more time that as long as we help the poor and look out for the needy, then our healing will come swiftly, because it's a lie. The Bible is lying. I have worked among the poor for decades. I have fought for them. I have fought for justice. I have planted churches and overseen churches in Asia. I have done whatever I could take, and still absolutely nothing was happening. And I thought, this is an evil God. If this is true, this is pure evil. He's asking something of us that we cannot do, and he doesn't care about our devotion or anything else to move us on. So he sends us to hell from something that we can do nothing, absolutely nothing about. And I just thought, I cannot preach this text again. I just can't. And that became one of my faith crises too. And actually, what is it? And I think sometimes again, we end up just ending up quoting a few verses, hope verses or blessing verses or the verses against us, and actually lose the bigger journey. And my journey was that my healing was to say, I'm a gay man. And let the expectations of society and even more of church not color my decision making, but actually my relationship with God is actually what is important. And I started to notice that the spirit of the Bible was very different to what I've been taught. So I would say that can you see that again? It was voluntary for me. I was not forced to do it. If it was only indirectly. Each thing in itself was not necessarily bad, but it twisted the thinking, it twisted the soul, it twists the faith. And I think that because you just fall all the time, you can't live up to these different things. It almost becomes faith teaching, even though these people would never say it is faith teaching, just proclaim it, name it and claim it. It still became that burden definitely on my shoulders.
Yeah. Because it's something from the outside that is supporting something that is already in the inside. After everything you did, I mean, there is, as you said, there is nothing you didn't try, and you still get the message. It's not enough.
Yes.
How was that for you?
Awful. And because I also led a church network and also with churches and social work, I ended up also feeling that if there's any issues in any of our churches, it was my fault. Because as the overall leader, the overseer of the church movement, there will be the trickle-down effect of my spirituality and my sinfulness and my identity. And therefore, other people were suffering because of me being who I am. And that was unbearable. Because it meant that not just should I support them in their suffering, but I felt this whole blame flowing back to me. If you were a psychologist, you could immediately think, oh boy, are you neurotic? Because I tried to carry the world on my shoulders because everything was my fault. And can you imagine a spirituality that's part of informing that it is my fault, whatever is going on in India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, or whatever? How can you breathe? And of course, that became also almost a collapse in a one way of my faith, of saying, God, I give up. I took a sabbatical for 4 months, not because I was losing my faith, but saying this faith does not work and I'm hurting people. I cannot as a leader keep on hurting people just because I'm alive and I'm breathing. And so something just had to happen.
Wow. Yeah. I can connect. What I hear is you actually were the embodied evil. That's how you saw yourself, and that's exactly what I thought about myself. And I would do so much just to be as perfect as possible, as good as possible to everyone to compensate this evil. So I can very much connect. Yeah. So, what would you say to people today who are still believing that reparative therapy works and that gay people should go to reparative therapy? And also, what would you say to LGBT people who are considering going to or taking part in reparative therapy?
I would say, please don't. Please don't go through this. It is bad psychology. Again, I've got a doctorate in psychotherapy. It's kind of I'm not just kind of saying, okay, from a pop psychology point of view or whatever, I've actually studied these things. You are damaging yourself and you're damaging others if you do this kind of thing, because you're trying to twist people's personality. And that also means we are going against God, because everything good comes from God, and our identity, who we are, is a God-given thing. So therefore, God must be using all our diversity, whatever that diversity is, rich, poor, colored or not, whatever, gay, straight, LGBT, all that is part of showing something of God. And we need this mosaic of people and expression. So please don't do it. Stop harming people. And actually, if you look at it, there was one statistic from the state that said, if you go to church and an LGBT, there's 3 times, or was it 3 or 6 times as big a chance that you will commit suicide than if you're not a Christian. So church is not a healing environment. Church becomes a damaging environment. And if church is not a healing environment, but actually we feel worse about ourselves and we actually do not function so well, then we're destroying people's lives. And if there's one thing Jesus is not about, is destroying lives. It is exactly the opposite. It's healing, it's forgiveness, it's restoration, it is giving people freedom from all the pressures and oppression that they've been facing. So I would say, please don't do it, but also acknowledging that yes, we do have 3 times as many suicides than the people out than straight people, and depression and anxiety. And I think that's exactly where the church should be, saying, what can we do to support you and heal you so feel safe in who you are? And no matter what society is also throwing at you, we as a church will help you spiritually and any other way so that you may be whole in this, and also being a healing voice to your community and to other communities. I think the church desperately has a voice and a role to play, prophetic voice. And in my own life, as again, I'm at the moment also just privately setting up a clinic, a health clinic. And one of the reasons is to work especially with men who has faced violence or abuse and spiritual abuse, and start to work with them through body therapy, psychotherapy, and spirituality to try to heal all these things that has been damaged, so that we again can live in freedom and be liberated. And I think we need to see many more things. And I wish I could do it via church. By the moment, I'm not able to do that. I before had health clinics through church. At the moment, being in my position, no church wants me, because who wants a gay pastor? Even in Denmark, a very liberal country.
Wow.
But I think we need a healing voice. So I think instead of the reparative therapy, let's do some other stuff, because we need to do something. Because there's many people in desperate need in different ways.
There's so many questions coming up right now with so many things, but I'm thinking there is a brainstorm going on in my brain. Like, okay, I should not go this way because it's gonna take too much time. But there is just so much experience that I want to take from. But maybe we can leave some things for maybe another interview. But for now, I want to ask you. I didn't plan to ask this, but I want to ask you one more question about reparative therapy, and that is this question, this lingering question that I've heard so many times is, but there are people who are saying that it helped them. Do you have any experience, knowledge, or anything about that? What is happening that people actually are standing on stages and recording themselves and saying, I went through this program and I've been changed?
Yes. But I think that, again, if you look at the sexual wholeness conferences, for instance, that often, again, a lot of straight people attend them. And often the illustrations you hear about, the whole thing of having sex here, there, and everywhere, or you look at too much pornography or things like that. And a lot of people do get help in these kind of things, so that maybe they're not unfaithful to their spouse, no matter if it's their same sex or somebody else, or they might feel a bigger freedom over pornography and things like that. So, of course, it does offer something to some people where they feel that, oh yes, I feel that God has helped me in some of these areas. And also for some, it's helped them to maybe, sometimes you'll even have to learn how to walk. I had to learn how to walk as well. How do I do a walk as a straight man? All these different kind of stupid things you go through. But at the moment, of course, you also think, oh, yes, it feels good. But why? Because you fit in. Because now you get praise. Who get praise in churches nowadays? If at all you talk about LGBT, it is, oh, I was LGBT, but now I got married, or now, I don't use pornography so much, or whatever it is, or I went to the public toilets and I had sex there, and now I don't anymore. So yes, there is a journey for some people, but I have heard very few real stories, if you look even with time, where people saying, yes, I did change my practice, but my orientation did not change. Very few people would say my orientation changed as well. But also think about it. If I wanted to be a pastor in a church and do whatever, don't say you're gay. We've got lots of churches in Denmark, and many people would in many ways be interested in the experience I have to work internationally and everything else, and train pastors and other things on lots of social projects. But now I can't, because now I'm toxic just because I'm gay. And we don't even get to, do you want to live in celibate? Or do you want to live celibate or not? Or do you want a partner or not? Often church will say, oh, that's the key thing. It is not. So there is some issues. But I also think that some bisexual people, if you want to fit into church, if you can then get the support in choosing your sexuality and your things towards the other gender, of course, again, you are a success and you fit into church. And some statistics shows that there's a high percentage of people in LGBT that are actually bisexual. We rarely talk about them, but there's actually quite a high percentage. And of course, for some of them, their life is easier if they choose the other gender than those of us who are clearly gay. And therefore, we are attracted to our own gender fully.
So coming back to thank you for this answer, first of all, but coming back a little bit to your story, how was your whole coming out process? How did it come about, and how did it go?
Well, for the first of all, I've had this I've always been out to some since I was a teenager, but also in getting married and having children, I would tell my story less and less. So I'll always still be people who knew, but I'll do it less and less in respect to my family. Also just practically that my kids would not be teased in school, for instance, or things like that as well. But it the more fully coming out, it was after God spoke to me, and also after we agreed to divorce, and we shared that with our kids, but also with our fellow pastors, our co-pastors in our church fellowship that I was leading. And it was absolutely awful, because people misuse power. People who have known my stories for 7 years suddenly used it against me as if they knew nothing. They've said they were supportive. They've said that, yes, our denomination is actually inclusive and affirming, and we would, again, marry same-gender people or whatever. And they have been totally for that. But when they got the chance because of divorce to kick us, they kicked us out. So from sharing it to our co-pastors and till we were out of church took 48 hours. So we shared on a Monday, and on the Wednesday we were thrown out of church. For deceiving the church was what our fellow co-pastors said. And the deceiving part was that we did not go around telling people all the time. But remember, I did not have another partner. I was not in love with somebody else. I've not been unfaithful. We had lived our life as a really good family together. And actually this couple who said we deceived people actually had known my story for 7 years. And often used it against me as well and things like that. So it was quite awful. So I lost everything. I feel I lost everything. I lost my international ministry, the church that I planted 18 years previously and been leading, our social work. I had no salary for many, many months. We had to move out of our home. Nobody offered me a bed to stay, so I lived in the UK at that time. So I thought, okay, maybe I need to go back to Denmark, because there was only 2 weeks left, and otherwise I'll be living in the street. As a 51-year-old man, that is not very attractive, not for anybody. And then contacted some people in Denmark and just say I might be coming home to Denmark, even though I knew I was never going to return to Denmark. But suddenly it looked like maybe my only option. And then some people invited me into their home and to stay, have a room with them for some months, which of course was a lifesaver for me. Again, no pastors in the town. There were over 30 churches in the town, and I knew the pastors there, and I've been there for 18 years. I was one of the longest serving ministers in the town. Not one single person called me. Not one single person showed interest in any way. And that was very hard. And then the lies, of course, as well. On top of it, we were outed. We were not able to tell our own story as we wanted to as a family, because it was that kind of church movement we built up around transparency. And if there is something, we would do it, especially as leaders. So all four of us, my ex and my two children, would share our story at the worship service as we had agreed. People could ask us questions, and then we would leave, and the church would discuss how do you deal with the pastoral problem when it's actually the leading pastor, the overseer, and but we were not allowed to do that. So people kind of took our freedom away, and our ability to again show a church movement how to be a healthy church that actually would discuss things. One of our values in the church movement was you had to be a thinking environment, thinking through faith, thinking through other things as well, so you can really know what you believed. And they took thinking and openness away from the church, and the church collapsed a few months later. Well, officially it merged with another church, but in reality people were voting with their feet, and they just left the church.
So was it connected to your story that the church collapsed?
Well, we were thrown out and people didn't stay, but I think part of it was that actually we did hear from a good number of people from the church that actually really supported us and wanted us to be in the church. So I think that partly what was happening was that because there was not a real opportunity for the church to actually be part of saying, is this what we want or not? But they didn't go against the other people. But they, instead of going against them kind of in an open meeting or something, they simply started to stay away and start to look for other churches. Yeah. Some people did contact me saying, should we plant another church? What should we be doing and things? But this was a very difficult time when there's no income and you're losing your home as well. How, what to cope with and what you dare to do. So, yeah. So it's a very tough time. Yes.
Wow. A difficult story. I'm so sorry that you had to go through this. But I would like to hear from you when you think back. Is there something you wish you had done differently or prepared in a different way? How do you feel about this, what happened?
I don't think we could have done it very different, because our style was always being transparent in these situations where there's something going on. And this situation, a family decision had been made. I think people always will exploit you if they can. Power people will always do that. And I think we were just kind of on the receiving end of some power people. It was very hard losing, in a way, my baby, the church movement that I had started and worked for 18 years. As a family, we have sacrificed for a lot. And I still miss the churches in Asia that I was also overseeing, and all the fantastic work that they're doing and still doing. And when I hear some of the things they've been doing here during COVID, I get so extremely proud and thinking, yes, this is our church. This is the way we look after people. This is how we care. This is when also the preaching and everything else, where many people also saying, this is God's punishment on people or whatever. I'm thinking, what picture of God is that? But our church has stood out and said something different. And so I'm so proud of them, and I would love to, in that way, still be part of developing a church movement, because boy, do we need some good news through churches to society today. But I don't think I could have done it very differently, because people got freedom to make their choices. And people made their choice, or some people did, and that cost us dearly. But I also hope and believe that God is with us. And if there has been a door slammed in our face, then God will help us to open another door. Not because I believe God closed that door, but because I believe that God works for justice. And no matter if I'm right and wrong in every single detail, well, he loves his people, and he wants to kind of to help us forward. So I do believe there'll be other openings, and I have seen some other openings, and one of them is to suddenly become the co-president of the forum, which I'd never expected. And there's been other things too, but I'm still longing to see the next stage of breakthrough, and especially being involved in church ministry more directly again, in developing movements around the world. You live also in a country where I'm thinking, where are the house churches and other things as well, where we can see there's inclusiveness, and then many other countries I'm seeing there's such a need for new church movements to do something, to make a difference, and to be a voice of healing. And I hope that I'll be part of that.
I wanted to ask you, how was it you came out and you got this message, you are not broken. What happened then for you? Like, how was that for you?
Well, it was the most freeing moment when God spoke to me like that. I do believe God speaks to us, so that is not something weird for me. And I often do prophetic workshops with people again, how to hear the voice of God, things like that. So I've done that for many, many years. But I never know when God says these few sentences that is really life transforming for me or for others. And for me, I just broke down in that moment that I heard that. I was sitting there typing, and I just started to break down. But because I felt liberated and I felt love in a way I've never experienced before. I thought I knew something about the love of God and the grace of God, but I didn't. I realized I had absolutely no clue about the love of God. I knew something about performance Christianity. I knew something about trying to be good enough to earn a little breakthrough or an answer to prayer. Of course, I would never say it like that, but it was actually how I functioned in many ways. So suddenly just realizing that God is saying, I just love you as who you are, and that's how I want to be. But the thing that he said, that I've been faithful to the church and to my family, was almost the most fantastic thing. I'm thinking, I have really tried that. So I've really tried to be faithful in any way, but just felt I failed because this whole neurotic state, as I said before. So it was just free, but it was also sad because I knew that now we're moving to the close of my marriage. So it was this joy of liberation, of a God who loves me. And it totally transformed my prayer life, my Bible study life, how I want to work and minister for God, the authenticity to what I do and whatever. So things dramatically changed. Not because I kind of forced it through, but quite the opposite. It was actually almost like a giving up thing, and then God just came through. So it was a very, very powerful moment. Simple words, but transforming words.
Wow. If there is, I don't know, a book or any other resource that you found really helpful through that time, yes, what would you suggest the people to read or watch or listen to?
Well, for me, what I actually did was because I thought I need to test if this was from God or not, because it's very easy in a way to say, I just want something that suits what it is for me. So I have a whole, one of the bookshelf up there. All those books are LGBT books. So I simply went out, bought one book after the other, only to realize there's a lot of things that happened for these 30 years that I knew nothing about. And it was not a specific book, but it was actually starting to see that both LGBT and allies had really shifted. Many people, also university professors in the evangelical world, have been teaching one thing, started to question, is this it? So Gushee is one of the people who's written a very good book. There's also one with a guy who was straight, but actually went into the club, tried to behave like a gay man for a year, just to try to see how people respond to that. So he came out as gay, even though he was straight. It's a really funny book, but also very thought-provoking. There is the Martin, what is he called, the Catholic guy? He's a Jesuit. Not James Martin. What's he called? I need to look at my bookshelf to see the titles. But again, he wrote some things about the injustice in the Catholic Church, where he's not saying change the teaching, but he's saying, can it really be true that we behave like this to our brothers and sisters? Is it right to use abuse? Is it right to throw people out or whatever? So I actually think it was not one book for me, but it was a whole collection of books, and even the 3 or 4 view books where people came up, 4 view books where they came up with different theological angles, and I could see it up against each other, and all of them just said to me, "Oh yes, I think this is true." And I went back to the Bible again, not just the 6 passages, the club of passages, but actually the broader thing. Yeah. I wrote a book myself as well about other stuff, and not just the 6 passages, because we're never going to agree about those 6 anyway, but trying to say, is there a bigger picture? Is there a bigger thing? So I wouldn't say there's one book, but otherwise I would have to go up just and look at the shelf and give you some titles. But yes, but it was a whole range of things. But it just convinced me that, yes, it was the voice of God. And I'm not just crazy. I'm not just selfish. Because actually it did have big consequences, wasn't it? In many ways, it would be easy if God said, I'm going to heal you now, and now you're straight. That would actually make my life very, very easy. I would have continued in my marriage. My church ministry and everything else would have continued. All that would be easy. The message to me was actually the tough message, even though it's a liberating message. But now there'll be other kind of consequences instead.
So I'm going to ask you to please send me the links to some of the books, especially the one you mentioned. I mean, I'm personally interested, but I guess that some other listeners and viewers might be interested. And that is the book about the guy who lived as a gay man for a year. It sounds fun.
It is. It's very
a shift of the story in the story. Great. So as I mentioned, the links will be in the podcast description. So please find the links there. And before we end this interview, because you can also find another recording, we'll talk about Arno's new book that is coming out, and it is in the Priceless news section. So click there. It will be put up on the screen, and you can click and go there and listen to what the book is about. But before we go there, actually, before we finish this up, I wanted to ask you, how is it being LGBT in Denmark in these times? Yeah.
I think that if you're not a Christian, this is quite okay for many.
Yeah.
It's the evangelical, charismatic world that is difficult. So we have a state church, a Lutheran church. And then that is controlled by the government, and the government decided that the church had to be inclusive. Yes, you can get married as well in the church. Denmark was the first country that had civil partnerships 31 years ago. So as a society in general, it has moved on a lot. Of course, we still have homophobic things in the football stadium. Of course, most of those kind of macho sports, nobody is out. So even though we're an extremely liberal country and very open-minded, it's actually only open-minded if you're kind of in the arts or something else, then it's okay to be LGBT. But in general, it is much, much better than many places in the world. I think for us in the kind of evangelical wing of the church, it is very difficult because we have roughly 400 churches in Denmark of other denomination than the Lutheran Church. And there are 3 churches that I'm aware of, 3 Baptist churches that are inclusive. So it is 3 versus 400. So again, for me, where do I go as a pastor, as a Christian, as an evangelical, as a charismatic guy? Where do I go? Because all the doors, Pentecostal, Apostolic, Hillsongs, Vineyard, you name it, they're all closed to me. Of course, they'll say they're inclusive, but it means welcoming. You're welcome to come and pay your tithe, but boy, you are not going to be a leader. You're not going to do anything else. And there's a glass ceiling. So I think for many of us Christians, it is very, very difficult because where do we gather? So I know a lot of people who are still going to these churches that I think actually is squeezing your soul and your personality. And I've seen what it does to me. And I find it really hard to see many people going still to churches that are harmful to them, or definitely could be harmful long term. Because if you're never good enough, then you have an issue. Just take something totally different. Well, as I said, I was a financial advisor first. And at that time, 60% of our staff were women, but women were now never allowed to be leaders because our overall managing director did not believe in women in leadership. So these women, no matter what they did, they could never become good enough. And they were well educated, experienced, fantastic people, but they could never, ever get the position that they should have. So often men who were not as good got the position. It's a little bit the same in the church for us who are LGBT plus, is that no matter what we do, and why do you think I have many of these educations? Well, one of them is, please see that I'm good enough. I know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to prove my worth to church, to society, and to God. And that's why also, again, I push to so many projects. Of course, part of it is of an honest heart, but some of it was also, please accept me for who I am. Maybe there's a little bit good in this person. So I think as an LGBT Christian, it is still very problematic if you are not a Lutheran or on the very liberal side of church life. Then there are some of the state churches will be fine for you, but many of the evangelical state churches, you will still have an issue. And we have church movements in Denmark within the state church that in no way is inclusive, even though officially the church should be.
Thank you so much for everything you shared with us. Thank you again for the vulnerability I experienced talking to you. I'm so glad that you were my guest. I hope, dear viewers and listeners, that you enjoyed it too. One more question I have. You said that you are doing therapy, even different kinds of therapy, if I understood it right. So is it only for people from Denmark, or are you offering it online? Like, how are you doing that?
Well, at the moment, because the clinic is at home, but because I do psychotherapy and lots of other things as well, of course, can easily happen on Zoom. The new initiative I'm having is actually where I get people on the massage table and using something called body therapy, which is about combining your body and your psychological makeup. So it's very much again saying, why do you keep on having lower back problems? Well, for many people, there's a psychological issue behind it. Or for us who have been living in shame and in the closet for many years, some places there might be some anger sitting in your solar plexus that kind of cannot get out, or some unforgiveness or something else. So I simply work both physically and also through talking therapy to try to release some of these things that actually has ended up sitting in your body, because your body remembers what you've been through, and your whole posture, everything else, is to do with what have you been through life until now. So therefore I work more intensively both with the more physical, but also, of course, with the psychological side, and if people are Christian, then also with the spiritual side, and trying to say, what is God saying through your body? So it's kind of the full ideal thing is throw people up on the massage table and we'll do something. But yes, I also would do things through Zoom and other things as well.
So where can people find you? You're publishing books, you're a therapist. Where can people find you?
Well, my books is on all the major distribution channels. So it means that if you look up for Amazon or even your local bookshop, they will usually be able to get hold of them. So I published 2 books, and my third is coming out this month here in November. And so all the kind of the normal channels, they will be out on those ones. My Facebook I'm on Facebook, so my full name, people can reach me there, or I'm in the moment also putting up a website, but it's not finished yet, which is called soma.ws, where I again write about some of that, but also within the forum, I sometimes do workshops. So at the Eastern European workshop here later in November, I will also be doing a workshop, so people can attend that as well if they want to. So very open to do some webinars and other things as well for people, or doing one-to-one stuff. So, yeah.
Great. So please send us also the link to your webpage that will be, so we can put it up and people can try and visit it and see when it will be up there and get in contact with you. So thank you, everyone, dear listeners and viewers, for being with us. We'll see and listen to each other. Well, you're listening to us, obviously. We can't listen to you, but we'll do that soon again with another guest. So please come back. As I said, the links are in the podcast description. Like this podcast, subscribe, and share with others, as well as leave us a review. So watch us and listen to us again soon. Until then, bye.